Standing up in McKinney, this is According to Callus, episode 618, coming to you on the 10th of April, the year of our Lord, 2024. And what do you know for what we're in store? This was supposed to be the week to talk about Civil War, the movie, and kind of tie it all together to the various other things going on in life. However, I was able to score the second of my 3 Dave's interviews. And, oh, wouldn't you know it, had a little issue at the executive committee meeting. More on that later. But, as always, the thing that matters most, the thing you can do to help me, help you, the thing that you can do to continue to make a difference, to be heard, to make an impact in our community, that's Collin County, McKinney, Texas as a whole, is one, let's focus on Texas. The feds are lost. You can't fix DC. It's Texas or bust, right, baby? So that means I'm over on the social media. I have a page. I have a group. I'm a pro over at Gab. I drop in at MeWe. And for the time being, my stuff is still over at YouTube. Help me out. Download the episodes. Share them. Let my growth reflect those of you out there that actually care about what's going on in our community and want to know and want to have an independent opinion on what things are. And here's what I offer you. My best understanding of what things are happening and how they potentially affect you from my independent point of view, right? And let's be honest, I'm quite upfront about where I'm coming from. I'm always looking for the liberty-oriented view, and I try and keep in mind that, you know, sometimes there are things that have to be done that maybe aren't the thing I would prefer, but it's the thing that's necessary, and I won't violate principles just to get a little win here and there. I want to always look at the big picture, and I always want to remind you, dear listeners, there is a big picture, and you need to be aware of that when you're doing things, when you're making decisions. So join me, come along, follow the program. Here we go. It is a Texas Tuesday. Today I had intended on spending my time talking about the 3 items that Michael Savage used to talk about often: borders, language, culture, right? That's what makes up a country, a nation, a culture, the language, the border. Those are all things that are necessary in order for a nation to exist. Now, we the people of these United States, we're not united anymore. We're not a singular nation anymore. And I would probably be bold enough to say we haven't been a united singular nation since the inception. No, that's why they had federalism from the start. That's why they allowed for states to have different ways of looking at things and doing things differently, because you couldn't do a top-down solution for everything across the entirety of this continent. There are a whole lot of things that are different in Florida that are in Washington State, and in Maine, Southern California, and Texas, and Minnesota, and vice versa. There's a whole lot of different people, cultures, ideas going on. You can't expect the same top-down solution for all those people across the entire federal nation. Now, look, if you don't believe me, go listen to historian Brian McClanahan talk about this. He is far more informed and educated on this issue specifically, but I keep bringing this back because you need to have a better understanding of the history and the culture of these United States so that we can make our moves going forward. We have to understand that without a unified Texas, we're toast. Without a Texas that has a similar productive culture, we're toast. If we don't have a common language, we're toast. Now, look, I know there's a whole lot of folks here that their first language is Espanol. No harm, no foul. I know that there's a whole lot of Tejanos here at the foundation of the Republic of Texas. I get it. No offense taken. You're speaking your language. I'm speaking mine. There is an onus on me, in part, if I'm going to be a good Texian, to know some Spanish. I think that's a fair requirement. But the flip side of that is we're still majority Blancos. We're still majority gringos. We all speak English. The language of commerce, the language of technology is all English. Like it or not, that's the way it is. So we're trying to help Bring everybody up to speed. Build a common culture through a common language. This is not something that should be handled with a hammer. No, this is a handout. We're here. We're partners. We want to do a good job going forward. It's very uncommon that I run across somebody that's been here 3-4 generations that speaks the language of their forefathers. Back home in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I was born, very rarely did I ever run across somebody that was of German heritage that still spoke German or read German naturally. Same thing with the Polish, the Italians. It was common practice. We're here. We're Americans now. We move on. The Irish on the East Coast. I mean, they like their Irish culture, but they all speak the American English. They all want the American culture with a certain respect for their roots. In many ways, I see that playing out with the folks that come here from Central America, particularly Mexico. They want to respect their culture and their history from where they came from, but they want to be Americans, or they want to be, better yet, Texans or Tejano, Texians, whatever your choice of words are. I'm not looking to create a fight over a definitional word, just saying that if you want to be a Texan, you have to act like a Texian. What is the culture? Well, there's a certain amount of that rugged individualism, right, that used to be preeminent through all of these United States, but unfortunately, as of this point, is really devolved to where there's very few states that actually hold that as a good thing, that actually promote that as something that they want. Now, you can probably throw Wyoming and Alaska and Maine and some of those other states in there, but as it stands, that is a Texas attitude. That is something that the rest of the states, when they think of independence, when they think of an independent culture, it's Texas. But I've been here 27 years, and I interact with a whole lot of people, and we take in a whole lot of people that are not native Texians. They're not even native Tejanos. And I will tell you, there's a certain amount of clash of cultures here. They want to bring the stuff with them from where they came from. And if it was so great where they came from, one wonders why they left. Now, some have to follow for their jobs. Some have to, they just looking for slightly greener grass. But when you bring all your baggage from where you came from, when you demand all the crap that you left behind, you're not doing anybody any favors. But yet that's what we face every day. So when I talk about the borders, the language, and the culture in the context of the Michael Savage kind of three-play there, right? So we've covered the language, right? Look, everybody gets an opportunity to learn English, the American English, the Texan English, if you will. It is a helpful tool for all of us to speak a common language. It seems like a very bare minimum thing. It doesn't seem to me that we're doing anybody any favors by not helping them learn English. That being said, there's also an advantage to a whole lot of other people learning to speak Spanish. Why? Because the biggest majority of the minorities that are in this state speak Spanish, if not as a primary language, a secondary language. And secondarily, one of our largest trading partners is Mexico. It would be in our best interest to be able to communicate them or with them in their own native language. I think it's a fair request. I don't want to have my ballots printed out in 14 languages, but I can fully understand and wrap my head around if you're down in Brownsville or out in El Paso, why they might have the ballots or governmental papers in Spanish. Now, I'm not a big fan of it, but I understand it. And I'm not going to beat people up because, look, I know old people too, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but as a guy that's north of 50, I can tell you that when I was trying to learn Spanish, what little Spanish I know, it was extremely difficult at age 30 to pick it up. However, my daughters, who got it when they were in grade school, one is I would call fluent, and the other one is probably not a whole lot better than I, but at least can run in that circle without too many problems. So I think it's a good thing. And I don't see it as a negative that a good Texian is bilingual. And I don't really begrudge anybody that would want to learn French, though I'm not sure what use French is for other than learning how to surrender. I'm just kidding. And German's kind of passé at this point, but certainly can see some advantages there. And if you wanted to learn Chinese, I mean, if you have to ask, I don't know what to tell you. And for that matter, same thing could be said about Russian, right? You should probably know what our two quote unquote biggest enemies' languages actually are saying when you hear them. Just a scenario. So we've covered the language. I've beat it into the ground. I've talked about culture. I'm quite confident that culture makes sense, right? I'm not looking to create a new culture. I'm just looking to kind of solidify that which already exists. And maybe not the culture that exists in 2024, but perhaps the culture that existed, I don't know, in 2015. Or better yet, 2017, right? Pre-COVID, pre-wussification, pre-rainbow stuff. I mean, just a good, solid, quote-unquote, mildly conservative Texian culture. I don't need everybody to be hard right. I don't need anybody, or I shouldn't say everybody. I don't necessarily want everybody to be hardcore libertarian, but I want for us all to be able to communicate, see the big picture, and work together to get good things done for the state or the Republic of Texas. I'm not asking for too much here now, am I, folks? Right. So, I mean, again, so I think I'm confident I covered the idea of culture, right? Culture is just how you interact and how you function and what are considered norms. I don't think it's normal. Well, I'm sure I've covered this in other shows. So I'm not going to go down there. I don't want to waste the time. All right. Borders. This is the key, most important thing that we're all missing out on. I think at this point, our western border is probably just as significant, if not more important, than our southern border. And what do I mean by that? Look, we all understand, and we to a degree have a certain amount of sympathy for folks that are coming here from Central and South America. I mean, we're not entirely dissimilar culturally in Texas versus Mexico. I can see why you might want to come here. It's certainly a better place than where you're at. It's understandable. So if you have a border issue, then it becomes a question of what's the right way to deal with the border issue. I mean, realistically, I understand that nobody's enthusiastic, quite frankly, of a bunch of Yankees or a bunch of Californians coming here. But if they actually really, truly are coming here for a better life, right? They're coming to the promised land and they're going to leave their Yankee stuff behind. Okay, fine. We'll take it. No problem. But again, the borders, which we can't enforce by ourselves and which the feds don't seem to be the slightest bit interested in defending, that leaves us to do the bare minimum. And the question is do we really need to run it up so high that we've got a armed encampment along the entirety of the border? Well, I would like to think that's not necessary, but that's what they're pushing us to. If we can't have a border that we respect, now keep in mind, when you have neighbors, one of the things that gives a good neighborhood is good fences, respecting each other's turf, respecting each other's boundaries. That's what the border's there for. We're not looking to lock people up and don't let them leave, and we're not looking to keep out the entire world. No, it's an orderly fashion. Come in, pay us a visit, perhaps emigrate if you meet certain requirements. That's fine. But that's not what we're doing. That's the exact opposite of what we're doing. We've thrown open the gates, told the entire world, send all your criminals, all your crooks, all your dirtbags here. Oh, we'll take anybody else you want to send too. But, have we never learned? I mean, look, we had the amnesty in 86. How did that work out for us? I mean, I assume that's what they're working for now, right? You just throw enough people in here fast enough without any restraint. We'll have no choice but to give them all amnesty, make them all citizens. How's that going to work out for us? Excuse me while I don't hold my breath. Again, this directly, and I knew you were wondering where this was going to go. This directly relates to the whole concept behind civil war, right? You're going to have your different factions, your different areas, and people are going to feel more strongly about liberty than other groups of people are. And it will not necessarily break down strictly by state or strictly by geography. Locationally, it's going to break down on the rural-urban divide. Wow, the rural-urban divide. It'll break down over that. It'll break down over cultural differences between Yankee and everyone else. It'll break down between, certain historical family ties stuff. I mean, there's a whole lot of things at play here. So when I referenced the other day the notion of the Civil War cube, right? Matt Bracken, go find the article. It's very enlightening. It should be scary, but I don't want you to be scared. I want you to be informed. I want you to have an understanding. So when we're talking about this movie, Civil War, I finally did get to see a review on it, and I haven't seen it yet. I'm looking forward to seeing it. But one of the things that struck me is the guy said, there really wasn't that much politics in it. It wasn't really looking to set up a why it happened, but just now that it has happened, what's occurring? What are the consequences of it occurring? And honestly, I think that's a very good take on that kind of issue. The details of how we got to a civil war become less important after once it would kick off. And again, let me rephrase or remind you all, if you will, I don't want this. I would never advocate this. This is not going to end well if we go down this path. But in the movie, which is fiction, at least for now, some would call it predictive programming, but we're just going to stick with a fictional account of what might happen. That should give you pause. I would encourage everybody to go watch it and just consider the implications of what you're seeing before you. Now, I contrast this with Red Dawn, my childhood movie. Whoa, that's so cool. Man, do you think we could really do something like that? How would we stand up against an invasion? The premise here is there is no invasion. You're very likely looking at a brother or a cousin or your neighbor that turns on you. You don't want that. It's a terrible idea. Just think about the atrocities that would be put upon each other if you came to blows over whatever the scenario is. I'm not sure what that looks like. You have to be very careful and consider if you want to go down that road. I don't. I understand and I accept that this may be a future that I can't control and I can't prevent from occurring, but I'm not going to cheer down. I'm not going to be excited about it. I'm going to be concerned, maybe prepared to some degree, or at least braced for that possible outcome. So I'm asking you all, really consider, think hard. Think about the consequences to your family, to your community, to your 401k, to your Social Security. Now, that's one of the things that I want to spend a minute talking about here. I had a conversation with a guy that was asking questions about Texit, and he seemed really hung up on the Social Security question. Now, to his credit, Daniel Miller's already covered this, and I know there's maybe some, let's say, nuance that might get left out of it, so I'm not going to revisit that. But if you're so concerned about that little bit of money, if you're so concerned about the pittance that the federal government's going to give you for staying a good federal government citizen, then my suggestion would be kindly go to Yankee Land. Kindly vacate and go to California. If that money is so important to you, then your liberty and your freedom are not. If you're willing to give that all up for a check from Uncle Sugar, I'm really certain that I don't want you to be a good neighbor to me because I don't think you are a good neighbor. Now, I understand people need money to survive. I understand that everybody has their own unique circumstances, and I'm not judging you specifically based upon something that you think you have to do for your family. But again, if you make that decision, don't suck everybody else down in your wake. Don't cause a problem for everybody else around you because you weren't willing or capable of taking on that risk or that burden. Liberty isn't free. Freedom isn't free, to repeat something that we've heard most of our lifetimes. There are people that wear uniforms to protect that from outside invaders. But what's interesting is their their oath says all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I'm really concerned in the way they've been remaking our military as of late. Perhaps they're not teaching about the domestic enemies, or worse than that, perhaps they've redefined what a domestic enemy is. You ought to be very concerned about that. You ought to really consider what's at play here. I'm not enthusiastic and I'm not thrilled about this. But I'm hoping that some people will go in with open minds and go watch this movie. And if it's half as good as I'm hoping it is, perhaps it'll give you the conceptual thing that we really are not well served by fighting against our brothers in the next community over. The best outcome is not to come to battle over something like this. I don't know how else to say it. Now, I've hit my 20 minutes, which is kind of the minimum here, and I want to wrap something up here in the remaining couple of minutes here. I did a special episode yesterday. I talked about something that happened on Monday night. I don't want to spend a lot more time talking about it because at this point, anything I say can and will be used against me. But I'm really disappointed. I thought no matter differences, no matter whatever, there were adults in the room and we would behave like adults. Apparently, I was wrong. Now, I have a friend that's going to do his best to find as much video evidence that there may be. I have other people that are going to be involved in looking into this, which it should have never come to this. It's sad. It's a waste of time, effort. But the reality is all this is being perpetrated by somebody with a track record of bad behavior. And when and if this comes to fruition, I am certain I know what that outcome is going to be. And with that, this has been According to Callus, and I will see you on the other side.